can't pay for. Just very good advice. Not that I don't think you can borrow sometimes, but you should live within your means. The other piece of advice, and I started actually at Saltmarsh Cleveland and Gunn when I was 18, so like right out of high school, I was actually here at EWF going to school. And with my first paycheck, he said, you better put some in retirement. So how many of you out there invest in 401k? How many of you can and you don't? How many of you aren't telling me the truth? That's good. That was a lot of hands, because I will tell you, it is difficult, and especially for those folks who are just entering the workplace, you're going to get that first paycheck, and you are going to be so excited, especially after going through school and maybe, pinching pennies tighter than you want to when you have your first job. If you never see it in your paycheck, you won't get used to it. And the other thing he told me was, every time you get a raise, you need to increase your retirement. Because as hard as it is to pay bills now, you want to make sure that when you're retired, that you can pay bills then.
Mine is also similar, and it was always, have at least 3 months of, whatever my paycheck is in the bank. And that was really true because, and I'll, share with what my husband and I did. We both worked for a large organization, and in 2008, we had the opportunity to buy our own agency. And, that was really scary because we were used to being employed by somebody, and it was a big risk to reach out. But for us, we loved what we did. We enjoyed what we did. So we took that leap of faith, and we bought our own agency. I didn't know that it would be a year before my husband would actually get his first paycheck, and it was about 3 or 4 months before I received my first paycheck. So, and that's the one thing that I'm glad that, if we hadn't had the money in the savings account, we might have made an emotional decision we can't do this. But since we had the money put away, we made a logical decision to really invest in the opportunities that we were presented with. So that was one of the big things that I think really paid off for me is being able to make that logical decision rather than an emotional decision. And the other was similar to Allison, is at a very young age, actually it was my sister who was younger than I, and she was, wanted to introduce me to her financial consultant. And I really thought, gosh, they cost money, don't they? If I have to go see a financial advisor, it's going to cost me some money. And she was like, no, you just need to go talk to one. It's not going to cost you anything. And she was like, and then I really started to see it because it was only $50. It was $50 a month that I started off with. And I'm so glad that I did that because, compound interest is amazing. And you're right. Every time you get a raise, you have to invest in yourself, and you have to pay yourself.
And there's something called the time value of money. And as I get older and older and older, and that gets shorter and shorter and shorter, the compounding effect and you start early, you have no idea. These girls, they're absolutely correct. You just automatically do it, and all of a sudden you see, oh my gosh, I can retire, and I can, I won't be eating beanie weenies every night.
So next question, Shaw, why don't you take this one? What is the best career advice you ever received?
It's hard to pick just one because so many people have helped me for my career, and one of them is sitting, lots of them are sitting in the audience, particularly one, Bentina and Terry. I can't wait to hear you. Hear from you.
We'll all be taking notes.
So I think I'll just settle with, I call play the hand you're dealt. So I don't know how many of you play bridge. You have bridge players here? None?
It's not as popular in this country.
All right, move on. I dated a champion in the college, and he later became my husband, so that's why we talk about bridge.
So anyways, dating advice.
Skip. So translation, don't let anyone else define who you are. So each of us is different. So for me, there's lots of ways to define me. I was joking with Jennifer Grove in the back when I was sitting there and asked her how she would define me. So she said all these wonderful things about me. But one way to define who I am is I'm a foreign-born minority female, right? It's not very in the corporate America world, it's not lots of me there. So had I let that define who I am, I wouldn't be sitting where I am talking to you. So just know who you are, and that's one way to describe me, and there's lots of ways to describe you. Are you really good at numbers or sports, or are you really creative because you have that mindset? Whatever defines who you are, play that with you and just pursue your dream that way.
That's great advice. Cecilia?
And I'll add to what Shaw was saying in terms of, I got my work ethic from my parents. My dad particularly was an educator. He was an educator, and so had all these little pearls of wisdom that I still hear in my head. And you know, the one thing, and it sounds really very cliche as well, but just be your best, whatever that version is of yourself. We do start out our careers working. You are constantly looking. The last panel had a lot of good little pearls of wisdom, but you do need to do your best. That was one of the things that I learned early on. And find your passion, whatever the passion is. Did I have a passion for banking? No, I had a passion for helping people. And that gave me the outlet to be able to do that. A lot of times you don't relate it to that. You don't relate accounting to what that means to people who you are helping. And so whether it's the spouse that just lost her husband that you're sitting there trying to help her figure it out, or you know, the mother who lost a child and is trying to figure it out, that's your passion. That's what gets you up in the morning, and that's what keeps me doing the job that I do.
That's great, and it's translatable into so many professions. So when we look in terms of much of this audience, we've got a big group of millennials, and as they start that job search, you know, we recognize that first and foremost, you all are focused on getting a job, right? You want a job, and hopefully it's a well-paying job. When you look beyond that as the primary goal and securing this well-paying job, what guidance would you all provide as they kind of navigate and they start that job search and the interview process? What's some advice you would give?
I'll start. With that, it's interesting. In our part of my role within our organization is really implementing the hiring process. And ironically, we're in a growth mode right now. So over the past 3 weeks, I've had about 70 interviews. And with that, it's I would really say is learn about the company, align, because every company has a culture, and to learn what that culture is, and and really dig within yourself and find out what really moves you, where can you flourish, and align yourself with that organization. Because each one of us has our own personal mission statement. We know, and hopefully we continue on the journey of trying to figure out what's important to us. And if you're looking for an organization where you can grow and flourish and learn from, there are organizations out there that align with who you are and who you want to be, and it's to find that.
Oh, I would second that. That was an awesome answer. Good job, Christine. Yeah, because I think somebody mentioned earlier, too, that it's not really common anymore to find folks who stay with a company for a long time, that this generation tends to bounce around. But you've got on stage here folks who have been with their organization for a long time. So that place that speaks to you as a person is out there. So look for that place.
And I know I think it was Wendy or somebody from the previous panel mentioned that when there's a disconnect and it doesn't feel right, make a change. If you need to change the landscape and go someplace else, then sometimes you just need to do that. It can be a hard decision, but you have to do what's right for you. Anybody else, any other comments on that?
Just real quickly, I was thinking, so I've interviewed lots of people throughout my career, and for young generation, sometimes I ask you a question. So sometimes some of the young, I shouldn't say them kids, young people, they come to the interviews and they say, I'd like to work just in strategic issues areas and like to become a CEO one day. So often the time you sit there, you think, oh gosh, that's very ambitious, right? I'm looking for an engineer today, and so But I want to, you guys need to think about, are we thinking about it right? Should we be thinking differently? It's okay for people to have ambition and tell you that. It's just finding that match. I completely agree with you. Is that what we are looking for? So something for you to think about.
Okay, so once you get that job, beyond just doing the job, what suggestions would you ladies offer for integrating into a firm, into a new role? What would you suggest that they need to focus on?
I would say finding a mentor, find a mentor within the organization is something that's, for us, it's also important for onboarding our team members, is to line them up with a mentor and to also mentor. That's really important within the organization. And I have had such an interesting life journey, and I never knew it would get me to where I am today. And so it's to appreciate the journey. Shaw mentioned about she's interviewing for an engineer, but someone wants to be a CEO. Well, one day you will be a CEO, but embrace the journey of the engineer to learn about other aspects that will get you to where you want to be. And I think that's something that's been so crucial for me is, going from retail to insurance as a processor to a customer service rep, to, trying to figure out how we're going to run a business to now being a part of a growing dynamic company. It's just, there's so many failures, so many mistakes. I never knew I would get to where I am, but I'm looking back, it's embracing that journey and embracing and really pouring in whatever you have into what you do and learning from whatever that is. So that's just my thought.
And I'll add to that, that, companies are really looking for people, not so much their capability, but their attitude about the job. And I hired a lot of people over the years, and I can teach them what I need them to know. They'll have the basic skill set, so we can teach them the technical side. Many times you can't teach them how to treat people and how to build relationships. And one of the most important things, I could never be successful without the relationships that I've built within the team that I have, with the clients that I have, with the superiors that I have. That is vitally important, that you learn some coping skills and some communication skills, that you can engage all kinds of people to help you, because you're going to need their help. There's no I in team, as you say. So building your teams, and I have an awesome team, and we have worked together so long now that it's just seamless. We understand each other, we know what the nuances are, we know how to communicate with each other, and it's fun. It's so much fun when you get to that point that it doesn't even become work. So build those relationships, take the time to do that.
Because the other thing I'll add when you talk about building relationships is you develop trust with those people that you work with, and with trust comes opportunity. That people may see things in you, you don't see things in yourself, and they trust that you are going to be able to do whatever they need you to do. And so, we should probably, I wish we'd had the appropriate and not appropriate question, because there's a lot of good stuff there too. But the relationship, it really is about developing, big arenas with your peers. So they know your intentions are good, their intentions are good, and you get opportunities and you work through problems a lot.
I would add, stay hungry. So stay hungry. Hungry for knowledge, hungry for relationship, if that comes from within, it's going to get you somewhere. So you build relationship not because you need that check to check the box, because you want that relationship, right? So stay hungry.
Yeah, I have to add on only because one of my Saltmarsh colleagues approached me during the break, and she would be so disappointed if I didn't mention this. But raise your hand. Volunteer for things. Don't wait to be asked. Apparently, I have a reputation in my firm that it's important to go ahead and seek out work and take initiatives and get involved, because I'll assign it if you don't do it. So get involved and take that initiative. It's really important. It also helps you get recognized within the firm and allows you that opportunity to network on multiple levels. So if you look in terms of an example. So let's kind of transition a little bit. And can you give us an example of where you had to make some compromises related to your career and family? What were they, and how did you work through that? Shaw, you want to take
Yeah,
that?
I think compromises come every day. We live in compromises. One of the former speakers this afternoon said there's no balance. And I completely agree with that. If you're at work, you're not at home. If you're at home, you're not at work, right? So I think for me, what came to a deciding point was, as I said, I moved quite a bit in my career. So back in 2005, my two young boys were 3 and 5. So it got to the point that I needed to move from Atlanta to Birmingham. And within 1 week of that decision, my husband got a dream job in Atlanta, and my job was in Birmingham. So what do you do? And so he and I had to have lots of hard conversations to say, we are a team. So this is why we're doing this versus that. So it's a compromise within your own family. And I'm sure all of you and the ladies here could give you a lot of examples about that. But I think that it boils down to having that system that would work for you. Only you, but no one else.
Any other comments?
Well, and I was going to say, some of it too is finding that place that you're supposed to be, finding that employer that understands. And maybe it's choosing a profession, or maybe you realize there's some things you do in the short term because in the long term you want it to be different. But some days you might come in a little late because your child has a play at school, but it means the next day you have to do something different. It really no one decision is the forever kind of decision. And so I think you have to keep that perspective sometimes in the workplace that, there are things that you decide for you are important and are your non-negotiables, but there also is a lot of flexibility. And probably if you ask the right questions where you are, and if you're at the right place, there's a lot more flexibility than you think.
Good point. So as this panel was getting to know each other, we had the opportunity to learn kind of that deeper dive about what makes us tick, and how do we make sure that we're not one-dimensional. I mean, we're finance people, and frankly, sometimes on the surface, we can be a little bit boring. So this was a hard question for everybody, but how do you ensure that you aren't one-dimensional? How do you ensure that you really kind of refresh yourself and make sure that there's another side to you that you put forward as well? And I want to start with Cecilia, because I have to tell you, we just got a chuckle out of many of her stories, but in particular around a central theme. So.
I can always give you a story because I could tell a story like my dad. I like the developmental network. And so my developmental network with a bunch of crazy friends. And they decided that it would be fun to do a marathon in Dublin. I was 49. It wasn't fun. So the next year they decided, well, we'll do 150 miles on a bike in 2 days. It'll be fun. No, it wasn't fun. Because now I'm 50-something. But, you will take the opportunities and your network of friends, and I would not be here without my friends. And some of them are work friends, and some of them are lifelong friends, and some of them are just people who say, let's go do something crazy. And I'm the first one, because I never say no, to say, I'm there. I'll do whatever. And to my detriment sometimes. So you really do, and I have a little bit of a different view about the life balance thing. I think you can do it. I think there are ways for you to have it. You really have to work at it to make sure that not one of those pieces is overtaking the other, but they have to be there. You, as someone said on the last panel, you're a whole person. I would think Wendy even said that. You're a whole person. And so you don't leave your children at the doorstep when you walk into the office. The next phone call you get is they're throwing up at school and you have to go pick them up. But being multidimensional also means that you volunteer and that you learn about your community. I am so excited, and I have to take a commercial break right here. I'm so excited about what's happening in Pensacola right now. Are y'all excited? Oh my God. There are so many cool things. So as millennials and as graduates and young people just entering the workforce, there's so much more opportunity today than there were for women entering the workforce in the 70s. And so take advantage of that, but also take advantage of all the cool things that we have to offer that will help you stay not one-dimensional.
Yeah, and you know, the other thing I would add, Cecilia, is there also is, you know, the season of life, which makes me feel super old that I just said that. But really, when
I'm
when I first started, in my career, and I had children, so that was it. If you had asked me, you know, my fun fact, it was when I have 2 kids, you know. But now they're older and a little more independent, so I have the opportunity to volunteer on some community boards, which I didn't do that in the beginning of my career because I didn't have time. So just because some of those activities you don't do now, it doesn't mean you won't ever do them. And so some things, there has to be some give. And so just know that some things you don't do now that you wish you did, it doesn't mean you won't ever.
And I have to agree with that. Volunteering, I think that it's so important, and especially whether or not you're trying to find that fulfillment, trying to find that purpose. Volunteering really can help you find that. But the other aspect too, and you asked the question about what can you do in an organization as far as development or training, and volunteering is a great way to do that. We encourage each of our team members, because sometimes if you're not in a management position, or maybe it may be a while before you have a management position that you can apply for, volunteering, you can help gain those skill sets with a nonprofit. So that's really important to do, is really just kind of put yourself out there.
I completely agree with that. I would just add a different aspect, which is keep your dreams alive. So I have a dream. I want to one day to be able to do interior design. For a finance person, that's a little crazy out there, right? So I love to take some classes, maybe at UWF one day. So keep your dream there. Whatever you would like to do outside of work, maybe that's adding another dimension.
So I think we've got some questions from the audience. We've got some folks who want to come forward. While we are waiting for those brave souls who I know have questions, there we go.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay. I'm Mariana. I just graduated from UWF back in May, so I'm entering the work field. What do you have advice for somebody in my position who, I guess it's been about 10 months? How do you hang on to your drive without, getting discouraged as you're trying to hit the ground running and realizing that that doesn't necessarily always end up the case? You have to start entry level, keep your eye on the goal. What would your advice be to maintain your drive?
To me, I think is being flexible, and you have an ultimate goal in your mind. You know what you're good at, right? And you know what you don't know also, so pursue those, but be flexible, because I don't think any of us would, 20 years ago, would have known that we would be doing what we're doing today. 'Cause I certainly didn't know 20 years ago. So,
And it goes fast.
and it makes me feel old too.
You didn't say season of life, so I don't know.
I'm winter.
Who else?
Yeah,
What other
I mean, I
comments?
would just add on it. Every day and every step takes you in a direction. And it is so cliche to say, I wish I had been aware of that when I first started out, because I had a pretty clear path. I was going to be a partner in a public accounting firm because that just spoke to me. I couldn't actually be any further away from that in terms of a career. And so be open, and when you find your place, when you find where you're supposed to be doing what your heart says you're supposed to be doing, you will know. And you're not supposed to know right now. You're supposed to know at some point. But I think Shaw said it too. You do those things, you do things, and you have experiences, so you know what is true to you, and more importantly, what's not true to you. And you make decisions, and you'll end up in some place you just probably didn't imagine.
One more thing to add. So I'm learning the term unicorn princess? Unicorn princess? Is that a term? I'm learning all these things.
Teach
so,
us.
Yeah.
What is it?
I don't know that term either, though, so.
My understanding is celebrate small success. Celebrate, be happy about it, and take that and put that in your head. You did
And
something
don't give
good.
up. Don't give up. Stay with it. And do those little things that nobody else will want to do. You know, get your career off the ground, because again, they're absolutely right. We did not see ourselves in these positions. I didn't start out in banking 21 years ago thinking 38 years ago thinking this is where I'd still be. But you do those things, but don't give up.
What other questions do we have?
Thank you, ladies, for coming in and experiencing and inspiring us and giving us to do some things as women here in Pensacola. My one thing that I've been sitting there itching to really ask is, I know we have a lot of millennials here, but what about those who are not millennials, who's been at a company for a lot of years and want to move up? So we do that by getting education. But however, it's not just the thought of being with your other peers and moving up and being their supervisor one day, but how do you keep the company that you're with or move around when you have the financial means to do so, of leaving something familiar to try to grow, and you're not a millennial because you're trying to compete with the world of millennials and you're trying to get this degree at the same time. You may not have children, but you do have other outside things that kind of affects how do you move around and make that choice to move around, and may possibly mean leaving the position that you've been at for so long to do that.
So having the courage maybe to take that leap and move on.
Right,
right?
the unknown
Yeah,
leap.
right.
Because you may not be able to do that right there at the company that you've been at for so long.
Sure.
And not be a millennial.
Does anybody want to take that?
I think the thing that makes that happen is your support network. And you know, we talked about it this morning, and even speakers on the other panel talked about that. People that you know, even outside of your current employer, may see opportunities that you don't necessarily see, and they will help you be successful. And nothing is more empowering than when people want to see you succeed. You know, so think about who you know or who knows you, and find out maybe what that place is that you're supposed to be, and rely on that support network. Because it's not just your boss or other people that you work with now. It's broader than that. And they may see opportunities that you don't see, or can support you in opportunities that you are aware of, you know, and still help you be successful in that.
Thank you.
And I would agree with that, because I was going through the same thing when my husband and I left, you know, our jobs to start our, you know, to buy our agency. It was terrifying. You know, it was really terrifying, and you have to really rely on those that believe in you, and you have to believe in yourself, because there's going to be, and there was for us, some individuals that, you know, we heard all the positives, but we also heard some negatives. So it's really to have the courage in yourself that you can do it, and to put together that plan to do it.
And don't sell yourself short. You talk to your supervisor and you come up with a plan. They are there to help you get to where you need to be. And if they're not, don't stop there. Go to the next level and the next level and the next level, and be very confident in your abilities. You've worked real hard to get where you are. You will have help getting to the next step. Don't be afraid to ask.
So we've got another question.
Yay.
What are your thoughts on wage gap between men and women, and do you have any tips or tricks for us to break those barriers down?
We don't like it. At all. Next question. No. I'll start with this one. I remember starting, and I was at one bank. I was 20 years old. I was going to go to another bank, and I remember distinctly saying to the employer that had called me, actually, because I had applied 6 months before, and then I took another job, then they called me, and I remember saying, you know, I can't take a cut in pay, and I make $500 a month. And you would think that anybody in that position in 1978 would be like, oh my gosh. But that gap is narrowing. And in my field, at my level, I do have an opportunity to make more than my male counterparts. But that's not always the case. One of the things that you do at some point, and I'm a pleaser, I don't say no very often, But there was one point in my career where I was challenged and I was asked to do something that I knew was a step down for me. Now, they didn't phrase it that way, as they normally don't. They will say, we have an opportunity for you. And I was trying to get a position that several male interviewees with not nearly the experience that I had were being considered, or they were going to hire from the outside. And I got up my courage after I cried a lot, and then I went into the city president's office and I said, this is not right. And this is not right because of these reasons. And one of the reasons were I was more qualified than the male younger counterpart. There was no reason that job should not have been given to me. So I went back to my office, cried a little bit more, and you don't let them see you cry, by the way. You close the door. But went back to my office. About 30 minutes later, lo and behold, I get a call from the city president, and they said, we've had some time to think about this, and you are correct. Now, they could have been afraid of a lawsuit. I don't know. I would never have done that because I am not that person. But I had to stand up for myself, and I had to say, this is not right. So when you get to, I've only had to do it once, though. In 38 years, I've only had to do that one time. So when you're faced with that, you really need to think through it. I was not confrontational. I was not angry. I was upset. But I had to stand up for myself. So, ladies, stand up for yourselves.
Yeah, I'm going to tag on because I used to do a lot of reviews. In one of my previous roles, I had over 100 portfolio managers that worked for me, and the majority were men. The support people were women. And part of the problem was that the women typically struggle a little bit with, and we heard this earlier, about positioning themselves, having the confidence to position what they've done and their successes. And one thing that you should always do is don't run from that annual review. Make sure if your boss is not approaching you about having it, there's not a formal process, you're asking for it, and that you've taken the time throughout the year to document those things that you've contributed to, the successes you've had, so that you have the facts and the information to take to the table, because typically what's tied to an annual review is an annual increase, right? So be prepared and take ownership for it. Any other questions from the audience?
Yay. Hello. So my question is about mentors. I know with the executive mentor group, you're assigned a mentor, so it's pretty easy for a mentee to get paired. But for someone who's new to an organization, how would you, or what advice would you give to them wanting to find a mentor within the organization and it not be just like an awkward, hey, you want to be my mentor?
That works? Yeah, it does work. But I will tell you the most important thing about a mentor is that you connect with them. And somebody said earlier, I think it maybe was their keynote, that people love to talk about themselves. And so if you ask for advice, people will give you advice. But it needs to be somebody that you respect, somebody that you have something in common with. If you are going to model after them, that it's a behavior or actions or, that represents how you want to behave. And then also know that your mentors may change over time because you need different things from different people as you move throughout your career. And you should ask a lot of people for advice because there's a million different ways to address the same kind of situation. And the more information you know, the more that you develop as a professional, as a leader, and how you approach problems and solve issues.
I completely agree on the point about having the right chemistry between you and the other individual. The other aspect is, I think to me, is one good way to build that relationship is through a project you work with them. So if you have an assignment and you look around the people on that team, if someone is connecting with you, you feel like you're connected with them and approach them, and through that assignment, that project, that way it's based on an actual piece of, actual work environment.
Good. Well, we've got a few questions here from the audience. When you look in terms of failures that you may have experienced in the past, can you share with us maybe one failure that you had and the lesson learned from that?
I go
There's
first.
so many.
So years ago, in college, I taught in a community school to make some money to support myself. So I was young and not very smart, I guess. So I was watching my professors during the day, and they all just went up and did their thing. You know, they didn't have to read their notes, and they just knew everything. So I said, I want to be them. So I went to teach, and of course I wasn't prepared. So I didn't know what I was talking about. So after a few months, I got a letter, and basically I was fired. So early on in college, I got fired for the first time. It was a failure. It really taught me lots of things. I think first and foremost, be prepared. Be prepared, do your homework. So that applies to how, what we do every day for work. It applies to your career, what you want to do. Be prepared to put that out, put those hours in. And so anyway, that was one of my examples.
It's a painful lesson to learn, yeah. Who else?
So I'll share. Because talking about your failures in a room full of 500 people is super exciting. So we had a position retire at work. This has been quite a few years ago. And I approached my boss at the time about, instead of filling that position, I just wanted those responsibilities. In addition to the stuff I already was doing, I wanted to do the person who was retiring, I wanted to do their job as well. And I made a really good case, and my boss, he'd been my boss for a long time, so, I felt like he knew what I was capable of. And he told me no. I don't get told no very often, and it felt like a failure. It felt like he was telling me I couldn't do the work. When you get down the road a little bit from that, he should have never said yes to it. It was absolutely the right thing for him to tell me no, because it was way too big. What I wanted to do was way too big for what I was ready for. And so my takeaway from that is, you don't always, sometimes things are a gift, even though they don't seem to be a gift. And things happen for a reason, and they happen when they're supposed to. So learn from that lesson. Try to find the lesson, because it'll pay dividends.
Very good. So Christine, I've got a specific question for you with respect to being a business owner. What's the financial reality of being a business owner? And for those who might have an entrepreneurial nature, what are some maybe tips you could share with respect to being a business owner?
That's a good question, because there's a lot behind that. One of the things that, of course, for us as we continue to grow and we're looking at scaling and expanding into other markets, it's really keeping a pulse on our financials and making wise decisions around that. Not to grow too fast, and be very strategic and intentional with the growth that we're looking at. Because I know that, when we look at adding on people, and our team is so important to us, and the last thing we want to do is have to go through layoffs. That is probably one of my biggest fears, is to ever do that, and I do not ever want to do that. So I think it's just really keeping a good pulse on just like you would in your own personal life. You have to treat your business the same way, is to have a good handle on your finances, have a budget, really stick to your budget, have goals. That's been very important to us.
Good advice. And for those of us who have been in the corporate environment and have gone through those layoffs and have had to lay people off, I respect that position and that healthy ownership mindset. So I have to, when we look in terms of preparing with this panel for today, it was interesting to see what triggered fear more than excitement. It was one specific question that came up, so there was a lot of thought that went into this, and I really want to end on this note and to put some context around it first. There was a woman in my panel last year who talked in terms of some advice she had gotten from her mother about fear and excitement. And she said that fear and excitement feel exactly the same. Just convince yourself that what you are feeling is exciting, not scary. And it was amazing how this particular question just scared the heck out of this panel, but we're going to go forward with it because I think it's a fun question. It's a great one to end on, to really think in terms of being a little bit more than one-dimensional in anything that you do. So the question is, if you were a Disney princess, which one would you be, and why do you associate with that princess? Who would like to go first?
I already said mine, unicorn princess.
Is that a Disney princess?
Made it up.
See, that's even better. It's your own kind of princess,
It's
right?
your own princess.
I'll go first. Cinderella, I think. First of all, I liked her real name, Ella, right? So she persevered. I mean, it's not about meeting the princess and all that, but when she lost her dad and got into a situation that's not very happy in her family, she stayed true to her dream. She wanted to be kind and have courage. And so be authentic, be who you are, and that's going to get you somewhere.
And it's really funny to say one-dimensional because I really had to go and research all of the princesses since I really didn't know. So
Did you take the quiz? Because there is a quiz.
Is there?
Which Disney
No.
princess are you? Y'all didn't Google
There was
for
almost
Disney
a Disney
princess
marathon at my house trying to figure this out. No. And I would say for me it would be Tiana with Princess and the Frog because of the work ethic and the drive to one day open a business and sharing that goal with my husband. That's been something that I would relate it to.
I just saw Tiana a couple of weeks ago with my 2 5-year-old twin granddaughters. So that was their favorite. As one of them will say, I identify with Beauty and the Bees, although the other one said, no, it's Beast. And that's because most of my peers are men. So, but actually I'm Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs because I'm also the mom. I'm their peer, but I'm the mom. They come to me with all kind of stuff. And stuff can be all kind of stuff. So it actually puts me in a really good position because I'm their peer. I no longer have to supervise people, which is so wonderful. And not that it wasn't fun, but for other people. But so that they're kind of afraid of me now, but I'm the mom. And so that puts me in a really good position. So I'm the mother of the Swimming Force.
So I called the expert on all things Disney princesses, my 6-year-old niece. And we FaceTimed the other night. Y'all, she's just super awesome. She's super awesome. So I told her I had this very big thing I was doing, and I told her the question that was going to be asked. At 6 years old, she thought it was a totally appropriate question, so she had no problem helping me with this. And she
Your
said...
new mentor, right?
Yes. Fabulous. She was fabulous. She said, Aunt Allie, I think you're Elsa. So y'all know Elsa turns everything nice, right? And she goes and lives in a castle all by herself, right? Y'all know, right? So I said, well, Addison, that is so awesome. Why do you think I'm Elsa? She said, well, you're strong and powerful, and you have a sister. And I do. Her mom is my sister. So we're going to go with Elsa because I have a sister.
Whatever intersections work. So I think in just wrapping up, what an awesome group. And thank you all so much for sharing and opening up. I think for the audience as a whole, when you look in terms of really planning for your career, don't neglect to plan for your financial future. Your ability to enjoy that career and be successful is so much more enhanced when you don't have to worry about the financial aspect of it 20, 30, 40 years from now. Give yourself choices in both and plan for